Some betrayals don't arrive with yelling or slammed doors. They come quietly, dressed as laughter, served over dinner, and sealed with a wineglass clink. You think you can win this? You're just a housewife. That was the first thing Marcus said after opening the divorce papers. No shock, no guilt, just a smug smile like he was watching a sitcom, not ending a 22-year marriage. He thought I'd cry. He thought I'd beg. He had no idea. I'd spent months gathering proof. Every dollar I invested, every contract I ghostwrote, every receipt he forgot I kept. He didn't know the house he planned to sell was never in his name. And when our son stood up in court, turned to me and said, "Mom's the only one who never left us," Marcus finally went silent. But by then, it was too late. Want to know how the housewife burned down the empire he built on her silence? Before we jump into today's story, take a moment to share where you're watching from. We love seeing how far our stories reach and connecting with amazing viewers like you. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe so you never miss the next surprising turn in our journey. Now get comfortable, and let's dive into a tale that will leave you inspired and intrigued. Monica Ellsworth rose at 5:30 a.m. The soft creak of the hardwood floor beneath her feet, barely louder than the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. The golden light from under the cabinets reflected off the sandstone-colored backsplash tiles. Tiles she had picked out herself during the remodel 4 years ago. A choice no one else in the family seemed to remember. She moved with quiet efficiency, preparing breakfast like clockwork. Grilled cheese toast for her teenage son, oatmeal topped with almond butter and chia seeds for her youngest daughter, who was on a health kick this month. She poured a fresh cup of dark Guatemalan roast, strong and black, exactly how Marcus liked it, not a drop of cream or sugar. In the dining room, Marcus sat at the table in his crisp button-up shirt, eyes locked on the television, where a financial analyst dissected the latest market swings. He nodded occasionally, murmuring, exactly as predicted, more to himself than to anyone else. Their kids buzzed in and out, grabbing bags, snatching toast, shouting quick goodbyes. Marcus adjusted his cufflinks, glanced at his watch, and stood. "I'm heading out," he said, grabbing his briefcase without looking up. No one asked Monica if she had eaten. The dining table, still scattered with napkins and crumbs, became her domain the moment the door clicked shut. She cleared it quietly, wiping surfaces, stacking plates. Her hands moved instinctively, like they had for years, like the act of maintaining everything had been stitched into her very skin. Marcus's voice echoed in her memory, sharp and confident from a decade ago. "Don't worry about money. You have me." That line had once felt like protection. Now it felt like a label she couldn't scrape off, worn down to invisibility. Once Monica had dreams. She had been a standout accountant at a major auditing firm in Denver, known for her precision and calm under pressure. Her ultimate goal had been to open a boutique tax advisory firm for immigrant women, helping them navigate the system and build stability. Then came their second child. Marcus's words, so gentle at the time, still lingered. "I want our children raised by their mother, not some stranger." So she stayed home. She chose it, believed in it. And when Marcus had panicked over funding his first consumer tech store, it was Monica who quietly withdrew $42,000 from her inheritance, a sum her late mother had left solely in her name. She never asked for it back, never even brought it up. She didn't want credit. She wanted partnership. But over the years, she faded into the background of Marcus's story, the home she cleaned, the Excel budget she updated every month. No one asked about them. Marcus never even opened the file. Sometimes, Monica imagined herself as the primer coat beneath a glossy mural, essential but unseen, the kind of work that held everything together without ever being invited to shine. She paused, sponge in hand, staring at the empty kitchen. The cabinets gleamed. The air smelled faintly of cinnamon toast. The hum of the dishwasher had become the soundtrack of her mornings. In the silence, a single thought rose up, quiet but sharp. In the house everyone believed Marcus had built with his bare hands, no one ever noticed the other pair of hands. Mine. And they're fading away. The restaurant was exactly the kind Marcus preferred. Italian, upscale, with white linen napkins folded into peaks, and a wine list that needed its own index. It was his father's 75th birthday, and 3 generations of the Ellsworth family had come together, neatly dressed and buzzing with performative cheer. Marcus sat at the head of the long table, surrounded by siblings, nieces, nephews, and his own children, naturally assuming the role of master of ceremonies. He thrived in this space, recounting the newest expansion plans for his tech chain, casually dropping names of investors and vendors, and slipping in a few humble brags about his latest speaking engagement at a regional business summit. The family soaked it up like gospel. Monica sat beside him in a navy sheath dress she had pulled from the back of her closet, smiling at the right beats, passing the bread basket when needed, and refilling wine glasses like a well-trained hostess. She was the silent rhythm beneath the melody of Marcus's monologue. Then came the moment. A niece, bright-eyed and curious, looked directly at Monica and asked, "Aunt Monica, do you go to work?" "Mom says being at home all the time must get boring." Monica barely had time to answer. Marcus burst into laughter, raising his glass mid-chuckle. "She lives off my credit card," he announced, voice amplified by a few glasses of wine and the safety of an adoring audience. "She's got the dream, spa days, shopping sprees all day, Netflix. What's there to be bored about?" The table erupted with laughter. Even some of the children giggled, looking at Monica like she was a walking punchline. Her cheeks flushed, but not from embarrassment. It was a slow burn, a shame marinated in humiliation. Her youngest daughter glanced toward her, fork frozen halfway to her mouth. Monica caught the flicker in her eyes, confusion, then disappointment, before the girl looked down and focused on her untouched plate. A sister-in-law chimed in, grinning over a glass of Pinot. "Lucky woman. Most of us would kill to be pampered like that. Women today don't know how good they have it." Monica didn't respond. She couldn't. Inside, something fractured, not with sound, but with stillness. A kind of betrayal she had no language for. It wasn't just that Marcus mocked her in front of their family. It was that he had trained them to laugh with him. He had handed them a version of her. Lazy, idle, ungrateful. And they believed it because they never saw what she held together in silence. And worse, her daughter had seen it too. The flicker in her eyes wasn't just disappointment. It was belief. For a second, her daughter believed the lie. That was the wound. That was what hurt. Her mouth was dry, and her stomach had clenched so tightly that the roasted chicken in front of her looked like something from a stranger's plate. She couldn't. Her mouth was dry, and her stomach had clenched so tightly that the roasted chicken in front of her looked like something from a stranger's plate. She sipped her water and focused on the tiny crack in the corner of her bread plate. Marcus didn't notice. He had already moved on, retelling the origin story of his company as if it had appeared fully formed from the dust of his brilliance. No mention of inheritance, spreadsheets, or her. On the way home, the car was quiet. The kids, sensing something brittle in the air, whispered to one another in the back seat. Marcus hummed lightly along with the radio, still basking in the glow of dinner's attention, completely unaware that he'd publicly reduced his wife to a luxury item. Monica stared out the window, arms folded across her lap. She didn't say a word, but inside her silence swelled, not with fear but with something colder, clearer, a quiet reckoning that had waited too long to surface. She realized in that moment, this wasn't just a bad night. It was a portrait of the life she'd built around someone else's ego, and how easily he painted her out of it. And for the first time in years, a question returned. One she used to ask herself in the dark, long after the kids had gone to bed. Is this what staying for them is supposed to feel like? She had shut that question down so many times, buried it under field trip forms and birthday planning and budget spreadsheets. But tonight, it came back sharper, louder. Later that night, after the dishes had been put away and Marcus's snores echoed from their bedroom, Monica tiptoed to the study. She opened the bottom drawer of the old file cabinet and pulled out a worn leather notebook, a deep brown with bent corners and her initials faintly embossed on the front. Flipping through its pages, she stopped at an entry marked 2014 Contractor Dispute. She remembered it clearly now. The roof had started to sag barely 6 months after they'd hired a cheap construction firm, Marcus's idea. She had contacted the insurance company, gathered documentation, filed the complaint, and negotiated with the legal team for a settlement that covered the full cost of the repairs. Marcus had been on a business trip, never involved, never asked questions. He never knew. She reached toward the back of the drawer and retrieved a folded document, yellowing slightly along the edges. It was the deed to the house, a legal transfer signed by her mother before Monica and Marcus had even been engaged. She had taken full ownership of the house then, because Marcus's credit had been wrecked by a series of failed startups. She had assured him, "We'll fix it together. We just need to get past the banks." And he had promised her, "One day, I'll make sure everyone knows you saved me." But that day never came. She looked at the deed. His signature was nowhere on it. Not then. Not now. Monica sat back in the chair, surrounded by quiet walls and the faint scent of lavender from a candle long since burned out. Her hands rested on the worn paper, fingers tracing the edges of her name as if to remind herself it existed. She wasn't angry. Not yet. She was something older, something heavier. A kind of grief you carry not for what was lost, but for what was never seen in the first place. It was the ache of invisibility, the sharp kind that doesn't break you with noise but dissolves you over time. She had mistaken tolerance for strength, endurance for love. And now the weight of years spent keeping peace felt like the very thing that erased her. There had been other moments too, ones she had tucked away in corners of her mind. Times when she had looked at herself in the mirror and struggled to find something worth defending. Times she feared Marcus might be right, that maybe she really hadn't done anything. Those were the hardest. Not the betrayal, but the slow erosion of her belief in her own worth. She thought of all the times she had made peace with being unacknowledged, all the times she told herself it didn't matter who took credit as long as the family was safe, the house was in order, the kids were fed, the bills paid. But tonight had proven otherwise. She had once been the one who held the roof above their heads, literally. And now she was merely the one who cleaned up after the jokes that tore down her dignity. "I used to be the one who held the roof up," she whispered to herself, folding the deed with quiet care. "Now I'm just the one who clears the table after someone else's laughter." The next morning, Monica woke at 6, same as always. But instead of heading straight to the kitchen like clockwork, she walked past the stove and sat down at the end of the dining table, Marcus's end. Usually cluttered with his leather-bound planner, trade magazines, and half-finished to-do lists scribbled in permanent marker, today it was empty. She opened her laptop and clicked through to a folder buried beneath layers of daily routine. Marcus shuffled in minutes later, rubbing his eyes, tie still loose around his collar. He paused in the doorway, eyebrows pulling together at the quiet kitchen. "No coffee?" he asked, scanning the unlit coffee maker and empty countertops. "You sleep in or something?" Monica didn't look up. "No, I just have a few things I need to take care of." Her voice was even, gentle, but not apologetic. It was the first ripple in what had been still water for years. Marcus lingered, clearly unsettled by the absence of his usual routine. Fresh brewed coffee, eggs already plated, Monica already in motion, making everyone else's day easier. But he said nothing more, just tightened his tie and left for work, alone. Monica turned her attention to the dusty filing cabinet tucked beneath the stairwell. She hadn't opened it in years. Not really. She pulled open drawer after drawer, her fingers brushing against the worn edges of manila folders, receipts, invoices, maintenance records. Everything was there. The new water heater she paid for in 2012 when the old one burst. The HVAC repair in 2016 during a heat wave when Marcus was at a trade show in Phoenix. The garage door replacement, the landscaping for the front lawn. The countless small expenses, nothing big. She had always told herself that. They were all billed to her own credit card. She sat cross-legged on the living room floor, surrounded by years of nothing big. The pile grew. It wasn't just numbers. It was history. Every line item was a day she had stepped up quietly while Marcus told another story of his solo success. She pulled out her laptop again, clicking open the family budget spreadsheet. She had maintained it since 2009, titled plainly, Monthly since 2009. Each tab was a different year. Each line showed allocations for groceries, utilities, mortgage payments, savings for the kids, Marcus's travel expenses, her own rare purchases. It was meticulous, color-coded, efficient. Marcus had never opened it. When she tried to show him once, he patted her hand and smiled. "You're so good with this stuff, babe. Just keep doing what you're doing. I trust you. Trust. That word tasted different now. It no longer felt like respect. It felt like indifference disguised as praise. Clicking over to the shared family email account, she began searching old messages. Most were mundane: school newsletters, HOA reminders, order confirmations. But one subject line caught her eye. Monica, funding strategy, sent May 8, 2011. She clicked it open. It was a full capital investment plan, cash flow forecasts, repayment structure, market risk assessment. Everything Marcus had needed when applying for the loan to open his second store. She remembered staying up until 2 a.m., putting it together, while nursing a cold and waiting for the dryer to finish. She'd emailed it to Marcus directly, not thinking twice. Opening another window, she searched her document archives and found the PDF of Marcus's official loan proposal, the one he'd submitted to the bank. It was nearly identical. He had copied her plan word for word, only changing the title and adding his signature at the bottom. That loan was approved in 7 days. That store made him a local business hero. She leaned back in her chair, hands in her lap, her stomach curling, not from anger, but from the hollow realization that her contributions had been invisible by design, not by accident. It was theft in a tailored suit. Not just of words or numbers, but of presence, of legacy. He hadn't just overlooked her, he had erased her line by line until even she had started believing she was background. She reached for her phone and dialed a number she hadn't called in years. "Lynette Jones," came the voice on the other end, steady, professional. "It's Monica," she said softly. "I think I need to understand my options." There was a pause, then a kind but firm reply. "If you have documentation from before or during the marriage, contracts, emails, transactions, anything that shows financial or operational contribution, we can work with it. Courts don't ignore paper." That was all Monica needed to hear. She created a new folder on her laptop, naming it Silent Foundation. Slowly, methodically, she began dragging in copies of every file, scanned receipts, bank transfers, tax forms, invoices, notes scribbled on the backs of utility bills, email chains, old financial forecasts she had built in Excel. She printed some out, placing them into plastic sleeves, labeling each section with post-it tabs. It felt like organizing a case, except the case was her own erasure. She wasn't documenting the collapse of her marriage. She was documenting her existence within it. Midway through filing, she paused and looked down at her wedding ring. For years it had symbolized unity, family, love. Now it felt more like a gag order. She didn't cry. Monica hadn't cried in a long time. Not really. Her emotions had been folded into household routines, channeled into warm dinners and holiday decorations, silenced behind supportive smiles. Now her clarity came not from sorrow, but from a growing, steady resolve. She could no longer afford to believe that selflessness would buy her protection, not in a world where even credit scores came with ownership. That night, while Marcus watched TV in bed and scrolled through emails, Monica sat in the dining room, surrounded by binders and folders. She kept her laptop open, a blank document blinking in front of her. At the top of the page, she typed a single sentence. "He may forget everything I've done, but the paperwork won't." Then she pressed save. Marcus stood in the doorway of the bedroom, checking the time on his Rolex as Monica folded his shirts with mechanical precision. She placed his favorite navy tie on top of the crisp white dress shirt, followed by 2 neatly pressed button-downs, socks, and his cologne, packed just the way he liked. His suitcase, as always, was perfectly arranged. "Chicago again?" she asked softly, not looking up. "Yeah," he said distractedly. "Supply chain meetings. 3 days. Back Thursday night. Nothing exciting." Monica nodded, smoothing a wrinkle from the shirt as Marcus kissed her on the cheek and grabbed his briefcase. Minutes later, she heard the car pull out of the driveway. She stood in the middle of their room for a moment, still holding the now empty laundry basket. Then, as if moved by instinct, she walked into the laundry room and opened the lid of the hamper. Inside, Marcus had tossed the blazer he planned to wear on the trip. She reached into the inner pocket, more out of habit than suspicion. A hotel receipt fell out. She picked it up and stared at the header. The Ridgeview Resort, Sedona, Arizona. A 5-star hotel. The date matched his last business trip, the one where he claimed to be in Chicago. She didn't cry. Her hand didn't even tremble. She just quietly folded the receipt and slipped it into a folder she had started keeping under the bed. She'd stopped needing his explanations long ago. What she needed now was leverage, truth, preserved in ink and timestamps. That afternoon, she called Milo, a private investigator recommended by Lynette. He didn't ask many questions, just promised discretion and results. 5 days later, Monica received a manila envelope at the front door. Inside was a stack of photographs. Marcus was easy to recognize, even with his back turned. Tanya stood beside him, her hand slipped into his. They weren't hiding. They weren't even cautious. In one photo, he fed her a bite of dessert at a rooftop restaurant. In another, they checked into a luxury spa together. Monica sat at the kitchen table, flipping through the images in silence. Tanya, with her bright smile, designer handbag, and manicured nails, was a familiar face. She had worked at one of Marcus's stores 2 years ago, before suddenly quitting with a generous severance package that had surprised Monica at the time. Now it made sense. What struck her wasn't the affair. It was the casual boldness. The credit card statements attached to the photos were more painful than the images themselves. Spa services, boutique dinners, personal stylists, all charged to the business account. Monica leaned back in her chair. The house was quiet, save for the soft hum of the refrigerator. Her fingers traced the edge of the folder. She wasn't surprised, not really. The betrayal wasn't fresh. It was fossilized, embedded deep inside her, layered beneath years of polite smiles and swallowing her instincts. This wasn't heartbreak, it was confirmation. A final stamp on something she'd already filed away emotionally. When Marcus returned late Thursday, she helped him unpack as if nothing had changed. When he kissed her goodnight, she turned off the lamp and faced the wall. She could have confronted him, screamed, demanded explanations, but she didn't. What would be the point? He'd deny it, twist it, turn it back on her like he always did. She didn't need him to admit the truth. She already had it printed in high resolution. What she needed now was a clean break, not a messy scene. Later that night, she logged into their shared budget account to cross-check some bills. A new tab was open, a draft email from Marcus to Tanya. He hadn't sent it yet. Monica clicked. "Don't worry," it read. "She has nothing. Court will settle fast. This house is going on the market anyway. She'll get half at best." She stared at the words. They blurred, then sharpened. He was planning to force her hand, push her into a quick sale, claim the home as joint property, divide it down the middle. But what Marcus didn't know, had never cared to ask, was that the house was hers. She'd purchased it outright with an inheritance from her mother long before their wedding. Her name was the only one on the deed. She kept it that way because at the time, Marcus's credit had been too unstable to qualify for a mortgage. "I'll tell the world one day," he had said back then, holding her hand after signing the lease. "That you saved me." He never did. Now, he was preparing to erase her entirely. From the house, from the finances, from the story. Monica closed the laptop and walked to the cabinet in the hallway. She pulled out the deed, still sealed in its protective folder. Her fingers lingered over the embossed gold seal, the notarized signature, the date etched in ink. This house, every window, every doorknob, every wall patched and painted, was hers. Marcus had lived in it, decorated it to his taste, but he had never owned it, not on paper, not in name. She placed the deed beside the growing pile of evidence. She was compiling receipts, emails, records, and now, proof that Marcus was not just unfaithful, but calculating. Willing to strip her of everything, including the very foundation she had built for him. She looked around the room, the dim lighting, the photos on the mantel, the faint echo of her children's laughter in the hallway. This wasn't just a house, it was her archive, her shelter, her proof. "I once saved him from drowning in debt," she whispered, her voice steady, almost gentle. "And now he wants me cast out from the very home I bought." She picked up the folder, added the hotel receipt to the front, and sealed it shut. It was no longer about betrayal. It was about clarity. Marcus had made his move. Now it was her turn. Monica sat alone in the living room, her old laptop perched on her knees like an old friend she hadn't spoken to in years. The screen glowed softly in the morning light, filtering through the half-drawn curtains. Her fingers hovered above the keyboard, hesitant for a moment, then began typing in a long-forgotten login, an old investment platform. She hadn't touched it in almost a decade. The dashboard loaded, flickered, and then settled into a list of account names. She barely remembered. Her eyes landed on one, college fund, ETF growth 2015. She clicked. Her heart skipped. The account balance had tripled. Monica leaned back, stunned. She had opened it with a small inheritance from her aunt, just $6,000 to help with college tuition someday. She had researched ETFs late at night, planned the allocation herself, automated the contributions. Marcus had never asked about it, never noticed it, and she had never told him. She wasn't hiding it. She had simply learned over the years that some things were easier left unspoken, things that weren't flashy, things that weren't his. And yet, there had been times she'd second-guessed herself, especially after Marcus's offhand jabs, like the one about her experiment with freelance advising that hadn't turned a profit. She'd let go of it quietly, embarrassed, too quick to believe maybe she wasn't cut out for more. But seeing it thrive, quietly, steadily, while so much else had unraveled, it lit something deep inside her. Not pride, not triumph, just confirmation that quiet foresight was still strength, even when no one clapped for it. She closed the laptop, a quiet sense of ownership blooming in her chest, not of the money, but of the effort, the thoughtfulness, the long-term planning that had become invisible under the shadow of Marcus's ever-growing ego. That afternoon, Monica reached out to Ruth Andis, an old acquaintance from her brief return to the working world. Ruth had handled her friend's divorce years ago, with calm, precision, and fierce advocacy. They met the next morning at a quiet cafe on the edge of town, tucked between a bookstore and a dry cleaner. Ruth wore glasses and a wool blazer. Her tone was brisk, but not cold. Monica laid out the facts: the house, the investments, the business documents she had helped draft but never signed. She spoke in facts, not pain. Ruth listened without interrupting, then nodded once. "The first thing you need to do," Ruth said, "is systematize everything. Every piece of paper, every email. Put it into a timeline. Think of each document as a sentence in the story of your marriage." Monica exhaled, the breath carrying 20 years of unspoken work. That night, she started gathering it all. She dug through file cabinets in the hallway, pulled shoeboxes from the top shelf of her closet, dusted off old USB drives, printed PDF copies of tax records, piece by piece. She spread them across the living room floor. Receipts, contracts, emails, handwritten notes. She found the notarized deed to the house, dated 2006. She found 10 years' worth of bank statements for an account Marcus never touched. She found a draft employment contract for their first employee, typed by her in 2011. Unsigned, because Marcus insisted, "I'm the face of the business. My name is enough." She found a thank you note Marcus had written back when he still remembered she existed. "You're better at this tax stuff than anyone I've ever met. Thank you, babe." She stared at the note, not with nostalgia, but as evidence. By midnight, the living room looked like a forensic lab. Monica moved between the piles, sorting by year, by topic, by relevance. She labeled manila folders: property, financial contributions, business planning, unpaid work. Her handwriting, once small and round, had grown steadier, sharper as she worked. Something inside her shifted. These papers had always been there, stacked, filed, buried, but now they were proof. Proof she had lived this life, not as a shadow, not as a dependent, but as the architect of a home. A strategy, a stability Marcus had worn like a badge without ever acknowledging the hand that fastened it to his chest. At 1:14 a.m., she opened an old email archive labeled MISC. Inside was a string of forwarded messages between Marcus and a marketing firm from 2018. The tone was polished, articulate, too articulate. She kept reading. The strategy proposal outlined in the emails, it was hers, word for word. She had ghostwritten it for Marcus during a particularly stressful week before his Entrepreneur of the Year award. She remembered staying up until 3 a.m., balancing that with prepping cupcakes for their daughter's class bake sale. Marcus hadn't edited a word, just changed the sender and hit send. She clicked the next message in the chain. "Greg, your clarity of vision is remarkable. You're one of the most strategic thinkers we've worked with." Monica let out a soft laugh. It was hollow, ironic, a breathless release of something that had long ago turned to stone inside her. She leaned back, the light of the laptop casting soft shadows on the walls around her. Walls that held the physical markers of a life spent doing work that never got a title. I don't need to win, she whispered. I just need to be acknowledged. The next morning, as she reviewed a call schedule with Ruth, her tone was different. No longer tentative, just focused. Yes, I'll have the deed scanned and sent over, Monica said into the phone. Please send the initial draft of the petition. I'll start organizing the exhibits this weekend. She didn't notice her daughter standing halfway down the stairs. The girl lingered there, clutching the banister, watching her mother speak in clipped, professional tones that didn't match the apron and lunchbox version of her she'd always known. Monica hung up. Their eyes met. Are you leaving? Her daughter asked, voice barely audible. Monica knelt down and took her daughter's hands in both of hers. No, baby, she said gently. I'm staying. For the first time, I'm staying for me. She held her close, brushing a hand through the child's hair. And for the first time in years, Monica didn't feel like she was pretending to be whole. Later that evening, she typed a new document name into a blank Word file, rewriting the record. Monica Ellsworth. She stared at the blinking cursor. For the first time in her life, she was putting her name on something, and no one else was going to erase it. Monica sat cross-legged on the hardwood floor of the guest room, which had once been Marcus's home office. The walls were still lined with mahogany shelves, but the desk was gone, sold last month when he upgraded to a more executive setup in his downtown office. She had claimed the room now, softly, without fanfare. A reading chair in one corner, a small side table with a lamp, and in her lap, a fresh leather-bound notebook with a crimson spine. She uncapped a red pen and wrote across the title page in deliberate cursive, Timeline of the Unseen. This wasn't for anyone else, not for a judge, not even for her children. It was for herself. A map back through the fog of invisibility. She began listing moments, not dramatic ones, not obvious ones. Just the kinds of things no one remembered but her. 2013. Marcus nearly faced a lawsuit over a lease dispute at the Glenbrook location. The landlord had found a clause he could exploit. Monica had caught it. She rewrote the counter-proposal, negotiated with the landlord's office, and secured a revised agreement that saved them over $30,000. Marcus told people his lawyer handled it. Monica hadn't bothered correcting him. 2017. A senior employee accused Marcus anonymously of favoritism and unethical conduct. Marcus panicked. Monica drafted apology letters, personalized them, and sent gift baskets to 3 key clients who were ready to walk away. 2 weeks later, all 3 signed new contracts. Marcus called it a brilliant PR turnaround. He never mentioned who wrote the letters. 2018, the brilliant franchise expansion plan. It had started at the kitchen table. Monica had drawn a growth map on the back of a kid's menu, while Marcus complained about sales plateauing. She walked him through tiered pricing models, back-end support, and licensing strategies. Marcus later pitched the plan to the board as a confidential internal strategy. The credit again had a single name, his. Monica stopped writing. The pen hovered in midair. A dull ache pulsed at the base of her neck, not from resentment. She was long past that. It was from remembering how easily she had allowed herself to disappear. She closed the notebook and stood, stretching slowly before crossing the room. On the far wall, she began organizing files into labeled binders. It had taken weeks to compile everything. Documents, emails, annotated budgets. She separated them meticulously. Contributions, a record of every task, big or small, that propped up the family business. Assets, proof of what she owned before the marriage and what she managed during. Email chains, evidence of her behind-the-scenes authorship. Brand image, her marketing work, her feedback, her instincts. Unpaid hours, estimated labor logged retroactively with dates and descriptions. She placed the binders neatly on the newly cleared bookshelf. On the spine of each, she affixed custom-made labels in a clean black font. Then she added one final note on the top shelf. A strip of paper taped horizontally above it all. This is my career. No salary, but blood and intellect. Monica stepped back and looked at the wall. It was the first time in 20 years she had ever seen her work displayed. Not printed under someone else's name, not hidden in the cloud, not buried in a junk drawer. Real, tangible. The door creaked behind her. Her oldest son, Jonah, had come home for the weekend. He stood in the doorway, his backpack slung over one shoulder. He didn't speak right away, just looked around the room, his eyes scanning the binders, the labels, the handwritten notes stuck with color-coded tabs. Then he noticed a photo tucked inside one binder, half visible through the clear cover sleeve. He stepped closer, gently pulled it free. It was from the Entrepreneur of the Year banquet. Marcus stood center stage, accepting the plaque, all smiles and self-congratulation. Monica sat in the far corner of the photo at a table near the back, mostly in shadow. She wasn't looking at the camera. She was staring at Marcus, mid-applause. Jonah looked at the photo for a long moment, then slid it back into place. Monica didn't say a word as he walked past her in the hallway. Later, heading toward the kitchen, he paused. His voice was soft, but there was something new in it. "Mom, this is impressive," he said, gesturing toward the room. She met his eyes, searching for judgment, sarcasm, or dismissiveness. There was none. "Thanks," she said quietly. Her chest felt full and fragile at the same time. He nodded once and kept walking. She lingered in the hallway for a long while, heart thrumming with something she hadn't dared name in years. Recognition. It was slight, quiet, late, but it was real. Later that night, she returned to the room and added one final sentence to the notebook's last page. "You may never see what I've done, but now the world will." The envelope arrived on a Monday morning, pressed, crisp and formal, with the seal of Ruth Nolan's law firm. Marcus opened it at the kitchen island, his Rolex catching the light as he flicked the papers open with a flourish, expecting maybe a notice about taxes or a polite inquiry from the HOA. Instead, his eyes scanned the first line, then the second. His expression narrowed into slits. Monica Ellsworth had officially filed for divorce. Marcus let out a low laugh, sharp as broken glass. He tossed the packet onto the granite counter like it was junk mail. "She thinks she can beat me at this," Marcus muttered, half to himself. "I built this life. I'm the name on the business, the one who made all this happen." His voice rose slightly, echoing through the empty house. "She's a housewife, for God's sake, a glorified meal planner." Monica, standing silently by the doorway to the laundry room, heard every word. She didn't flinch, just folded the towel in her hands and set it down. Her gaze fixed on the sunlight streaking across the tile floor. The words didn't pierce. They confirmed. Confirmed every quiet dismissal, every overlooked effort, every time she was treated like a shadow in her own home. And still, she didn't rage. That kind of fury had long ago calcified into resolve. Marcus wasted no time. By lunchtime, he had retained Maxwell & Breer, a high-powered firm known for handling high-net-worth divorces with ruthless efficiency. His opening strategy? Go nuclear. Within 2 days, Ruth received the official counterpetition. Marcus was demanding an even split of all marital assets. Worse, he was seeking full custody of their youngest daughter, despite having been little more than a passing presence in the girl's school life. He claimed Monica had no visible means of income, and that the family's lifestyle was solely due to his singular efforts and entrepreneurial brilliance. The words burned as Ruth read them aloud, but Monica sat unmoved, legs crossed, hands clasped, her face calm. Not from shock, but from long acquaintance with the flavor of dismissal. It wasn't just a betrayal of marriage anymore. It was a declaration: you were never worth anything to begin with. That night, Monica lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her thoughts playing like an old film reel. She remembered the night their son had a 103-degree fever, and Marcus was unreachable at a corporate retreat. She remembered the spreadsheet she created, the investor proposal she drafted, always with his name at the top. She remembered painting the kitchen cabinets herself, while Marcus was off pitching expansion plans she had helped design. He had never really seen her. But now, he wanted to erase her entirely. Monica and Ruth began preparing their counter-strategy, one rooted not in vengeance but in truth. They labeled it simply non-economic contributions, a phrase sterile to most. But to Monica it pulsed with years of unpaid labor, silent management, and emotional scaffolding. They gathered every receipt for household repairs, every invoice she had managed under her name, emails that detailed her negotiations with the bank when Marcus's credit score had nearly tanked, their second loan, photos from store openings where she had greeted vendors while wrangling 2 small children, handwritten checklists for hiring and firing staff, planning logistics, smoothing out employee turnover. Every invisible hour was now being made visible, painstakingly, line by line. And beneath the task list, There were moments Monica kept to herself. The night she cried in the pantry so the kids wouldn't hear. The guilt she felt for secretly wondering if she had wasted her potential. The shame of once Googling how to explain a gap in your resume after motherhood. Then came a surprise. The court notified both legal teams that due to the unusual nature of the case and its implications regarding non-financial spousal contributions, the judge had approved a public hearing. Monica's voice wouldn't just echo through a sealed courtroom. It would resound through the community, through press, through precedent. Marcus was livid. That night, at 12:37 a.m., a text lit up Monica's phone. "You'll regret this, I'll make sure of it." She stared at the message for a long moment, then calmly took a screenshot. She forwarded it to Ruth. Subject line: New exhibit, emotional coercion. The next morning, Ruth added it to the growing binder labeled Psychological Control and Intimidation Patterns. Her notes were meticulous, clinical. Monica, sitting beside her, said nothing, until Ruth looked over and asked, "Are you sure you're ready for this?" Monica met her gaze, steady and sure. "He plays with power," she said. "But I have the truth, and I have the records." Ruth smiled, not in pity but in professional respect. "Then we build the case," she said. "The one he never thought you'd dare make." Monica left the office and drove home in silence, not the silence of defeat. This one hummed with clarity, a kind of internal alignment. She wasn't angry. She wasn't even scared anymore. She was done asking to be seen. There was power in the paperwork, and even more in the quiet refusal to shrink. She had lived too long in someone else's version of her life. This time, she was writing her own. That night, she added one more document to her binder, a small printed card from a floral arrangement Marcus had sent her years ago during the grand opening of the third store. It read, "To the woman behind the scenes, thank you for everything. Couldn't have done it without you." She taped it inside the front cover of her file, labeled Origins, and in the margin she wrote in pen, "You played by reputation. I play by receipts." The courtroom was packed by 9 a.m. It wasn't just family this time. Monica could feel it before she even stepped inside. The presence of former employees, a few curious neighbors, even a local journalist from the Arizona Ledger. They'd come to watch what was supposed to be a standard property dispute. But the air told a different story. Something deeper was about to surface. She walked in, steady, wrapped in a deep blue suit that matched the dusk of her resolve. In her hands was a single, thick binder with the title printed in bold, clean font, The Unseen Contribution. She didn't scan the crowd. She didn't need to. Every step forward was a declaration that she was no longer hiding in the margins. Marcus was already seated at the counsel table, tapping a pen against his teeth with the ease of a man who believed the outcome had already been written in his favor. His lawyer, sharp-suited, game-tempered, and arrogantly polished, rose first. "Your Honor," the man began, his tone laced with condescension disguised as civility. "We intend to show that Mrs. Ellsworth has not contributed financially or structurally to the assets currently under division. She has not held employment in over 20 years. There is no documentation to suggest she was involved in the operation or management of Mr. Ellsworth's business empire. This is, simply put, a case of a non-earning spouse seeking an unfair portion of a self-made man's legacy." Monica didn't flinch. Marcus took the stand next, his voice dripping with righteous self-satisfaction. "I started with nothing," he said, gesturing like a TED Talk speaker. "I put in the hours. I took the risks. Monica was home managing the house, yes, but the growth of the company, the expansions, the franchising, that was me. She didn't understand the business. Not really." He glanced her way. The same dismissive smirk from the breakfast table now stretched into full courtroom. Confidence. Monica rose slowly when it was her turn. Her steps were neither hurried nor hesitant. She opened her binder and approached the stand like someone who had rehearsed, not just the facts, but the weight of carrying them. For decades. She placed the first exhibit on the table, a signed document dated 2005, a $42,000 cashier's check drawn from her inheritance. This, she said clearly, was the deposit on the lease for the first storefront, paid in full before the business had a name. There was a small ripple in the courtroom. Next came an email from 2012. "This is the proposal for a bank loan to open the second location. I drafted it, calculated the cash flow, and presented the financial forecasts. Marcus copied this email word for word and sent it under his name. She continued, laying down document after document. Utility bills, grocery ledgers, credit card statements that showed she had quietly covered most of the household expenses for 2 decades, freeing Marcus to reinvest everything into the business. Receipts for software licenses, tax planning tools, even graphic design subscriptions, all in her name, all for materials later published under Marcus's. And then came the twist. She placed a thick manila folder before the judge. "This is the deed to our home. It's been under my name alone since 2005, before our marriage." Marcus's head jerked up. "This was a gift from my mother. The mortgage was cleared before Marcus and I even met. He's never made a single payment on it." There was a pause. So quiet it felt like the room had forgotten how to breathe. Marcus shifted in his seat, visibly uneasy for the first time. He leaned toward his attorney, who no longer looked so assured. Monica turned once toward the back of the courtroom. Her eyes landed on her eldest daughter, eyes red, hands clenched in her lap, a tremble in her bottom lip. Monica gave a subtle nod, then returned her gaze to the judge. "I don't have a pay stub to show," she said, her voice firm but warm. "Because for 20 years, I ran a household like a silent CFO. I wrote budgets. I negotiated with banks. I hired staff. I mediated crisis. I did it without vacation, without insurance, without praise. Not once did I ask for credit, but today I'm not asking." She paused, and the silence became something holy. "I'm insisting." A beat passed, then another. The judge looked down at the stack of files. One by one, the pages were turned. Real, physical proof of 2 decades of invisible labor. The silence now wasn't awkward, it was deafening, seismic, like the stillness before an avalanche. Marcus stared at his hands. When the court adjourned for the day, no one spoke for a long while. Even the journalist lowered her pen. Monica didn't rush out. She walked slowly, her binder in hand, her shoulders no longer slumped by invisible weight. She didn't look back to see Marcus's reaction. She didn't need to. She had spent 2 decades being unheard, and today, without raising her voice, without theatrics, she had filled the room. As the door closed behind her, she whispered to herself, "He used to laugh at my silence. Now it's the only thing he hears." The tension in the office was palpable before Marcus even opened the door. His usual entrance, brisk, confident, punctuated by shallow greetings and the sharp sound of his dress shoes on marble, landed differently. This morning, people didn't meet his gaze. His assistant, usually chipper and borderline obsequious, mumbled a "good morning" without looking up from her desk. A senior sales executive turned and walked briskly down another hallway the moment Marcus appeared. Something was off. He stepped into his office, and there it was, resting in the center of his immaculate desk. As if delivered with ceremonial weight, a crisp printout of an anonymous email sent to the entire executive board and major shareholders. Attached were 3 files, each labeled with surgical precision. File 1, Invoice, see View Presidential Suite, Turks and Caicos. File 2, Receipts, Birkin handbag, Cartier watch, shipped to Charlotte, North Carolina. File 3, Airline ticket, business class, JFK to Providence. Passenger 1, Tanya V. Holt. Passenger 2, redacted. Marcus stood frozen, pulse racing. For a moment, he considered brushing it off, shredding the printout like junk mail. But he knew better. The silence outside his door wasn't ordinary office politics. It was a countdown. Less than an hour later, he was summoned to a boardroom meeting. No agenda, no welcome, just a table full of eyes trained on him, with varying degrees of restraint and disgust. Marcus straightened his tie and began his defense. Tanya Holt was contracted as a strategic advisor on public relations and emerging markets. These expenses, while perhaps unconventional, were within the bounds of discretionary accounts. A board member, with decades more gray than patience, leaned forward. "We don't pay for Caribbean getaways or designer handbags under strategic growth, Marcus." Another added dryly, "Even the airline tickets were billed to the company's operational travel budget." There was no shouting, no gavel, just a cold, coordinated response. An independent investigation would be launched, effective immediately. Marcus Ellsworth was suspended from his executive duties, pending the outcome. When he returned to his office, hoping maybe for some coordinated damage control, Tanya was gone. Not just from the building. She had vanished. Her work phone was disconnected. Her personal accounts across every social media platform were wiped clean or set to private. No trace, no statement, no defense. Within 2 days, a local business journal published a damning headline: "Double exposure. CEO Marcus Ellsworth's financial and romantic scandal sends Ellsworth Innovations into freefall." Monica read the article in her kitchen. She sat alone, wrapped in a soft robe, sipping chamomile tea at the table where she had once served Marcus breakfast every morning for over 20 years. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply stared out the window and whispered to herself, he could have kept it all: his name, his empire, his dignity, if he had just looked behind him. I was always there, carrying the weight. But Marcus had never looked. And what he didn't know was that the chaos he now faced wasn't fate. It was strategy. Weeks earlier, in the quiet of a sleepless night, Monica had discovered something. While filing away a thick stack of old financial statements, Marcus had carelessly left behind, tucked between insurance forms and client invoices, were miscellaneous charges, spa treatments, jewelry, high-end travel with billing codes marked client courtesy. But there were no clients. Monica, meticulous as ever, had spent months creating a folder on a private drive titled Unauthorized Expenses. Every item cataloged, every charge matched against the company account. She wasn't impulsive. She was methodical. Because when you've lived 2 decades being told your value can't be measured, you learn to measure everything. Quietly, completely, with precision. And when the moment felt right, after Marcus filed court statements that called her useless, demanded the house be sold, and tried to take custody of their daughter, she made a decision. She opened a burner email, attached the folder, routed it through a masked VPN, and sent it to the largest shareholder. Marcus had never learned to respect the retired woman who once told Monica at a gala, "The smartest thing in this company isn't its tech, it's the quiet wife behind the scenes." Before hitting send, Monica consulted Ruth to ensure every document was legally admissible and couldn't be traced back. It had to be airtight. And it was. Now, it was sitting in the warm golden light of a morning Marcus would never see coming. She finally felt still. The phone buzzed with news alerts. Stockholders calling for emergency restructuring. Employees questioning leadership. Tanya, the woman Marcus had paraded like a victory lap, was now a ghost. Monica leaned back in her chair, closed her eyes for a brief moment, then reached for her notebook. She turned to the last page and wrote a single line. "He called me a leech." But it was the leech who cut the branch he was clinging to. The final hearing began under a thick, unspoken weight. The courtroom was filled to capacity: lawyers, former employees, local reporters, curious strangers, all packed into the narrow wooden pews. But unlike earlier sessions, there was no buzz. No side chatter, just the sound of papers rustling and chairs shifting as everyone waited. Marcus sat near the front, visibly diminished. His cheeks were hollow. His once carefully styled hair hung limply over his forehead. His navy suit was wrinkled, like it had slept folded on a couch. Tanya wasn't there. His high-powered attorney kept his eyes down, fiddling with a pen more than making arguments. Monica walked in beside Ruth, calm and collected. Her presence was striking. Graceful without fanfare, composed without needing to prove anything. In her arms she carried the same binder from previous hearings, but this time a bold cover had been added: The Cost of Erasure. After preliminary remarks, the judge looked toward her. "Mrs. Ellsworth, if you'd like to make a final statement before I take this case under advisement." Monica stood and approached the witness stand, the binder held tightly in her hands. Her voice was low, steady, but it carried through the room with more force than a shout. "I'm not here for gratitude," she began, "and I don't expect to recover what's already gone. I'm here for something far simpler, to affirm that existence does not require a paycheck. That a person, any person, does not vanish just because no one wrote down their name." She opened the binder and read, her voice unwavering. "Total hours managing the household, approximately 65,000. Contracts I drafted for Marcus without credit, 27 parent-teacher conferences I attended alone, 38 hours spent writing apology letters to save client relationships during business crisis. 219. She paused, just long enough to let it sink in. Not dramatically, but with dignity. These weren't just numbers. They were years. Decisions. Midnight anxieties and dawn preparations. Every breath she took trying to hold a life together without ever being seen. Each line a sacrifice folded into the background. Each hour a gift wrapped in silence. And for the first time, the silence had shape, and it filled the room. The judge, who had been scribbling notes, finally looked up. "If you could speak to yourself on your wedding day," he asked, "what would you say?" Monica's answer came without hesitation. "I would tell her to keep a piece of her life for herself, because one day she'll need it to stand when no one else is there to hold her up." From the back rows, a soft sound broke through the silence, a quiet sob. It wasn't Monica. It was her eldest son, Jonah. He stood and walked to her with slow, deliberate steps. No one stopped him. No one dared. He handed her a water bottle, then turned to face the courtroom, his voice clear enough for all to hear. "My mom's not a freeloader. She's the only one who's never left us. Ever." The statement cracked through the courtroom like a fault line giving way. Even the judge leaned back in his chair. Marcus, still seated, flinched at his son's words. His shoulders slumped, his gaze stayed locked on the floor, as if looking up would confirm a truth he'd spent decades denying. Monica took her seat again, eyes glistening but calm. She didn't look at Marcus. She didn't need to, because in that single moment, she had won. Not just a case, not just a home or a claim to a company, but something deeper, something sacred, the recognition of the life she had lived, the value she had always carried, and the love that had waited, buried, until it could finally rise. "The court hasn't ruled yet," she thought, "but I already won when my child finally saw that I'd been here all along." The courthouse in Scottsdale was packed with reporters, legal bloggers, and law students lining the front rows. No one called her a housewife anymore. The media now referred to Monica as the woman who built an empire without standing on the front lines. She entered in a soft gray suit, a vintage brooch pinned at her collar, her mother's wedding gift. In her hand she carried Silent Foundation, worn but dignified. When the judge began reading the verdict, the room quieted to stillness. Monica would retain full ownership of the Redstone house. It was deemed her separate property with proof of premarital transfer. 45% of Ellsworth Innovations shares were to be transferred to her, based on financial documentation and evidence of unpaid contributions. Full custody of their youngest daughter was granted to Monica. Marcus had failed to show any record of active parenting. Marcus was suspended from all financial management responsibilities within the company pending ongoing investigation into misuse of funds. Marcus said nothing. He didn't argue. He just sat there, eyes low, hands clasped, the last pieces of his empire slipping through silent fingers. A camera captured the moment he buried his face in his hands. The next day's headline read, "The man who built an empire forgot the woman who laid its foundation." Monica stepped forward once more. From her bag she pulled a worn notebook, the same one she had written in late at night, long before courtrooms and lawyers. The cover read, "Timeline of the Unseen." She placed it gently on the table. "In this notebook are the names of everyone who ever asked, 'What do you do all day?'" she said. "I did everything, for 20 years, no paycheck, no title, but with blood, tears, and more love than I ever received in return." A quiet stirred in the back of the courtroom. A man in a plain coat, someone only vaguely familiar, leaned forward. A former shareholder. He would later email her proposing a collaboration, something that would lead Monica toward a new kind of legacy. But in that moment, she didn't need promises or applause. "I don't need to be loved again," Monica said softly. "I just needed to be seen. And today, I shine brighter than ever." Not because she had taken something back, but because, finally, no one else was holding the light for her. 1 month after the verdict, the house no longer felt like a battlefield. Morning light spilled gently across freshly painted olive walls. Monica, in a soft linen shirt, hummed as she arranged a bouquet of daisies on the new oak dining table, the one she had wanted for years, but Marcus had dismissed as too much. Now it belonged entirely to her. In the living room, she and her youngest daughter sorted through old photo frames. Marcus's portraits were carefully replaced with landscapes, mountains, forests, oceans, a silent shift, not erasure, but redirection. Because healing wasn't always about forgetting. Sometimes it was about choosing what to remember. The next week, the ledger room opened its doors. a modest but bright space in a renovated building near the town square. Monica stood by the entrance, welcoming women of all ages. The center offered financial guidance, legal literacy, and post-divorce support, tailored for women who had once been made to feel invisible. Monica named it after the ledgers she had kept all her life, quiet records of everything no one had valued. A few days after launch, Monica received an invitation to speak at a local women's summit, titled Redefining the Invisible, Women's Real Work. The stage was modest, but the audience filled every seat: lawyers, stay-at-home mothers, entrepreneurs, students, each face a mirror of stories untold. Monica held the microphone with both hands. Her voice, calm but resonant, carried through the hall. She spoke of budgets written on kitchen counters, legal drafts without signatures, the hours logged in silence. She didn't dwell on blame. Her story was never about vengeance. It was about being seen. Invisible labor is still labor, she said, and recognition isn't about applause, it's about dignity. A hush followed. Then from the back a woman stood up, gray hair, eyes wet, voice trembling. If I've been silent for 30 years, is it too late? Monica's answer came without hesitation. No, if you're alive, if you still remember, if there's even one piece of paper with your handwriting on it, your voice is still here. It was more than a reply. It was a door, and behind it 100 voices were waiting to be let in. Later that night, Monica walked through her quiet home, pausing by the mirror in the hallway. She didn't look younger or stronger, just more whole. I was once called a freeloader, she whispered to her reflection. Now, I teach women how to unlearn that label. One story, one balance sheet at a time. It was a quiet afternoon. Monica sat by the window of a small cafe on a side street, a book open in her hands. Cinnamon lingered in the air, blending with the soft hum of jazz from the corner speaker. This place was nothing fancy, but it was peaceful. Something she hadn't let herself have when she was still Marcus Ellsworth's wife. She turned another page, not noticing at first when the door opened and the chime sounded. Marcus stepped inside. He looked older, shirt wrinkled, hair noticeably grayer. There was no entourage, no polished aura, just a man who had once stood at the center of everything, now moving through the world unnoticed. Their eyes met. Marcus froze. A flicker of recognition, something like guilt, crossed his face. He opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Monica simply gave a small nod. Not cold, not warm, just quiet. Her lips curved slightly, a soft smile without history or expectation. No bitterness, no need for apologies. He no longer held that kind of power. As Marcus stood frozen, she gathered her things: book, phone, the leather-bound planner she now used for her speaking events. In her mind, old memories passed like distant clouds. The sleepless nights, editing Marcus's investor reports, the ER trip with their son, alone, the dinner where Marcus joked she was just a housewife with a credit card. But now, none of it hurt. It simply didn't weigh on her anymore. She exited without a word. Marcus moved to the table she had left. There lay a folded newspaper, left behind by someone else. He glanced down, eyes catching a headline near the bottom. Marcus Ellsworth steps down. Ellsworth Innovations restructured under Monica Ellsworth and the Women's Ledger Foundation. He stared at the print, unmoving. Outside the cafe window, Monica walked with purpose, her gait light, her head high. She didn't need him to see her anymore, because at long last, she had seen herself. She didn't scream, she didn't beg, she didn't break things to prove she was broken. Monica simply stood up, armed with truth, paper trails, and the kind of strength only years of being unseen can build. And in that courtroom, in front of the man who once dismissed her as just a housewife, she rewrote her place in the story, not with revenge, but with undeniable presence. Dear friend, sometimes the quietest victories are the ones that transform us the most. Monica didn't rise with fire in her fists. She rose with the stillness of someone who had nothing left to prove and everything left to reclaim. As the Stoics teach, waste no more time arguing what a good person should be. Be one. And that's exactly what she did. She didn't rewrite the story to punish the past. She rewrote it so the future could have her name on it. Let her journey remind you, your value is never determined by visibility. It is built in the shadows, where love labors long and dignity waits patiently to be remembered. You may be silent, but you are never invisible. If this story touched something in you, don't keep it to yourself. Like, share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories that give voice to the quiet strength within us all.